I'm Abby Lin, and this is my channel. I'm currently a senior in high school, waiting on a uni application letter. In this channel, I will share about multiple aspects about my life, such as vlogs, being a Christian, and so much more. So today's video is very different and very hard for me to be normal because I will be talking about my testimony today and just beware that I might cry. So this is the second time I'm feeling this because the first time I was like, I didn't think it was good enough because I was very lagging and I was trying to skip some parts of very important aspects of my life because I don't really enjoy having that much of my personal life in my videos, but today we would be changing that and hopefully my family won't kick my ass. Well, I don't know if they would watch, but I know some of them do. And so this is a 19-year-old's testimony. Wait, let me just. Okay, so for background, um, I'm Taiwanese, even though I have good English. And people often ask me, why is your English so good here? Because I don't know. Well, yes, I know, but also I don't know how to explain. Because English as a second language here is very hard for people to speak fluently and also like read original books like The Catcher in the Rye and Harry Potter and stuff, even though I do have those friends, but they're in international school. But because for me, I grew up in an environment where my mom taught me English from a very young age. She would do sign language like boop, and then I don't know what, and so she would use ASL since I was very young when I couldn't talk, and she would also give me like flashcards like A apple and B banana and etc etc etc. So you could say that my mom really gave me the environment to learn another language from when I was young, and it was very all natural. And I used to watch. What did I used to watch? Wait, let me. Oh, I used to watch Paw Patrol and CBS Kids. Is that what it's called? It's like one thing that you learn how to read and how to write, and then Dora, da 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 da, and then a lot of things. And I used to watch YouTube like it was all English, so it was very hard, and it still is very hard for me to like speak fluently or maybe pronounce things in Chinese because sometimes I'll be like, huh, what does that mean? And so you could say that English is my mother tongue because it's the first language that I spoke. I don't know if it works like that, but if it doesn't, just like comment down below. But to me, English is my first language, and Chinese is very hard, or Mandarin is very hard. And so I grew up with a complicated relationship with my dad because he had bipolar, and so when I was little, I didn't know, but by the time I grew up, I could like start to piece things together. Like he would yell at my mom, and he would throw stuff in the house, and blah blah blah. He would take the car away, etc. 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 And so people with bipolar is unpredictable, I would say. And because my dad also had a very like he has severe depression symptoms and problems, but he never got diagnosed because he has his dignity. And so I grew up in something called 衣食家族 over here. And so it means that both sides of my families are mostly doctors. And so my dad was a doctor, and my mom went to medical school, but she didn't finish her nurse thingy majiggy. I don't know what that's called, but she didn't. And then she met my dad, and then she became a housewife. And so from a very young age, I was taught independence, and I was taught that I shouldn't, I should never sacrifice my own rights for marriage. And so my dad was also an alcoholic and a heavy smoker. And um, and when I was 7, he and my mom. So my hometown is Jiayi, and I was living in Nantou at the time. And so my dad moved back to Jiayi, and so it was me, my mom, and my brother in Nantou. And so one day, my dad picked me and my brother up from school without telling my mom anything, and the teacher let my dad took us away, and so that made me really aware of my surroundings, and I didn't really feel safe anywhere because something just might happen. And so I was basically kind of kidnapped by my own dad, and I was living in Jai for a month. And so for the first few weeks, everything was fine, but after a while, my dad started drinking, and so that's when everything started to went downhill. So when he drinks, he would be throwing stuff, and he would be yelling, and as a kid you wouldn't feel safe. And so me and my brother were hiding in the bed sheets and also watching Lego Ninjago at, I don't know, maybe 3 a.m. or 2 a.m. because we couldn't sleep and we were scared. But and so it continued on for 3 days, and we were constantly crying, and my dad was calling my mom a lot. And so my mom knew that something was up because we don't cry that much because we were already 7 and we weren't newborns anymore. And so she found out that my dad was drinking, and we were unsafe when she arrived with my aunt and uncle. And so I wouldn't get into the details of what happened in those 3 days because I think it's a bit too much. And so it resulted in me having trauma for years and years. And because my dad was an unstable element in my life, and so I never really got to the point where I could fully heal and I wouldn't live in fear anymore because I was constantly experiencing abandonment and then false promises from an adult. And when it's your dad, it really changes you, and you would start to think, oh, is it my problem or something? And so I slowly started disliking my dad and eventually hating him for the things he did to me and my mom and my brother, and feeling very hurt by him. And so because of traumatic events, I slowly started to have depression. And I used to, when I was in third grade, and this was after the whole alcohol and kidnap stuff. And I started to shiver, so it would be the arm and the leg, and mostly it would be the right part of my body. And so when it happens, I wouldn't stop, and I didn't know why. And the doctor said my physical health is fine, but maybe it was something mental. And me at the time, as an 8-year old, I don't know what mental health was, and it wasn't as recognized back then when I was a kid. And my mom didn't know what to do because we weren't Christian, and so we went to temples and everything. And they told my mom to speak something, and I don't know what that was, but it just didn't work. And so I started to know Christianity from my school when I was in primary school, because there was this minister that was invited to our school because he's from the US, I think. Mr. Cody, or yes, Cody. And so he would tell us like Bible stories, and I got very fascinated. And they were really good stories, and I just didn't really want to go to spelling bee. And so um other people would view my family as wealthy and that we were really nice and happy when I was at that age, because it's something my dad did, so whatever. But in reality, was I was mentally unstable and physically unwell, because actually from that point on I didn't really like to eat a lot, and so it slowly started to get worse when I grew up. So um yeah, and so I because my director was Christian, and so my director and one of the staff members would take would they would train my brother for competitions and everything, and my director would pray for us before we go on stage or before something happens, or maybe. And I remember that I think he prayed for me when I was having those symptoms where shivers and sometimes asthma. I don't know. It was a long time ago, so I don't remember as much. And so he was constantly asking us if we want to go to church, and he was trying to spread the gospel for us. And so one day we said, okay, yes, we could try. And so we went to a church, which is now my old church that I don't go to anymore. But because of that church, I started to know God, and my mom started to also know God. And so we got baptized after my first summer camp at AEF. I don't know if that's still continuing, but to me, that was a big transition. And it was after that me, my brother, and my mom said that, okay, we're gonna get baptized. And so after a few weeks, we decided to get baptized on August 26th, 2019. So it was like 3 days for my birthday. And we got baptized at this is the most crazy baptism, and this is very non-traditional, but this is like one of my favorite memories. So we got baptized at Longhian Pupu, so at a waterfall. And so my church was the type that we would go outside outdoors, and we would like the kids would play. So me as a kid I would play, and we would travel a lot, and we would go out a lot, like a big family and everything. And but the adults would be under a tree, and there would be spreading the and our pastor would be talking about God and talking about the sermon and everything. So yes, it was like that. But the down part was I wasn't really grounded in God. Like I wasn't really taught about the truth and the truth of the Bible and God and everything. I didn't really have a foundation. So for years I was really misguided and misled and I was very confused. And so because of that, we slowly started to stop going to church and we were like that for a few years and then slowly we started to find churches. So I went to two churches and one of them is my now church. But before I get into that, um, during the time where I was backsliding in my faith, my depression didn't get better and I started to have a lot of emotional outbursts because I wasn't feeling safe and because of drastic environment changes. So different from people in who like grew up in Taichung, I experienced like moving cities and then having a very different lifestyle. Like to me, Taichung was kind of competitive, and personally because I am not a person who is really suited for Taiwan's education system. So I had a really hard time there because first of all, I was in private school from my first year in from my first half year in middle school, and the second half of it was like public school, and I really couldn't get used to it because like the expectations and the availability and everything was just very different. And so by eighth grade, my dad had us enroll to international program, and so we changed curriculars or curriculum. And so at that year, I was slowly finding my place, and I had good grades for the first time after elementary, like very little elementary, like first year, second year. And then after that, slowly started to know that, oh, I wasn't built for this system. And so at that year, I was like, oh, wow. This is, so I'm actually not a failure as they might say in classes or in society because we still have a problem where we would determine one's value with their grades and stuff. But yeah, and so for the first time in basically my whole life, I feel like I belong somewhere, but it didn't last long because my dad died in winter break that year, and we were trying to hope that um, we could like go that my dad had savings so that I could at least complete that school year, but he didn't. So um, we had financial problems, and then we were faced with a lot of changes in our lives. And I, as a teenager, as a 14-year-old, I didn't really know what to do with grief. And I didn't know who to talk to because my mom was going through it, and my brother was going through it, and I was going through it. And also, a few months after my dad died, our old dog died too, so it was like bam bam. And so it was a very hard quarter of the year for us. um so oh, and small update, we now have 3 dogs for the past 2 years, so very good. It's just that they're very clingy, and one of them is under my desk. So right now I'm filming, and you can hear him being annoying. Like, why is Abby talking? I want to sleep. He knows not to talk when I'm sleeping. So yes. And what was I gonna talk about? So yes, oh yeah. So yes, as a teenager, you would feel very isolated in that time of your life, because I never even talked to anyone in my class because I just didn't want to, and I didn't feel safe. And so only my homeschool teacher knew. And so I was very isolated and very alone, and I didn't really know what to do. And so it continued on for another year because I was in homeschooling, and I had a really bad experience with my old tutor because she was like, "Why aren't you exercising and doing these things, and why aren't you like Gigi? Like, what's that word? I don't know." Okay, so I'll text that when editing. And so she kept talking about how I should help my family situation and I should be strong, but in reality, I was just getting really abused and hurt by her because I didn't know what to do, and I didn't know how to get better, because when you're a kid, you like I'm like I'm not the kid who could just be functioning after something like that happened, because I don't like, what kid does that? Like, if you're that kid, no offense, but also I'm not that kid. Like, I personally didn't know. Like, I was completely lost in my life because I got took out of a place where I thought, oh, I'll be there for 5 years. And suddenly that dream shattered, and suddenly I couldn't go abroad. And I had to try to find my place again, but it was very hard since I knew very clearly that A, this the that my country's system wasn't for me, and B, I would always have a disadvantage here, and there wasn't really much for me here because I don't really feel like I belong. And so it was very confusing for me, and I got into a really deep depression and isolation. And so slowly things got better through time. And so I went to high school. So I got enrolled in a school that has bilingual program. So it wasn't as hard as being in a normal class and having bad influences. And I eventually found my type of people, and I slowly started to find my place, even though I knew that it wasn't, I wouldn't feel fully as better compared to when I was in international school in 8th grade. And so um, during And so by that time I wasn't really into my faith anymore because of everything that happened, and I didn't have a healthy church to help me eat and no proper guidance. And so around the second year of high school, went I chose to give a chance to my now church, and I have been trying to heal since. Well, so I started medication on 2023 November, and I stopped my medication last year, so 2024 August. And so when I got into my church, what really changed me was I feel loved, I feel seen, I feel heard, and no one judged me for what I've been through or what my scars were. And they didn't hate me because I was self harming at that time. So it was like an on and off thing. But one of the major things was I started to go to my church's courses to build my faith. And mostly because I felt a very strong urge that I really want to go. And so I went. And it was very hard because I was also a teacher in a club, and I had to work on the students' assignments and teaching and everything, and also trying to get my grades up, even though I know it'll be very hard. But uh, during that, so I started going to my church from 2023 June, and so I got Medicaid at November that year. And so during that time period, I was going to my courses, and I was a mess, and I was hurting, and I was crying, and I wasn't fine. And so I started taking medication because I slowly I couldn't grasp myself anymore. I couldn't stop. It was very hard for me to stop myself from cutting because during that time I've always just did it with my own will. So I couldn't really take it anymore. And so I went to a psychologist, and they gave me meds. But personally, I wouldn't recommend medication for adolescents because it could be really harmful. And but also you if you can't get therapy, then I would suggest you to, like, okay, so if you don't want medication but you also want to go to therapy, but you don't have the finances for that, then I would say go to your school's guidance counselors. And before you go into, oh, I don't think guidance counselors are good, I would say that they're very different. Like they all had training, and they so look, if you had a bad experience, I'm so sorry, but also I would say try to get help. Like, at least if you can't go to therapy because by someone in a clinic, then I would suggest you to go to, your school counselor, since it's better than like bottling everything up inside. And personally, I used to go to my school's guidance counselor, and it really helped to just talk it out and have someone to listen to and get advice about how to slowly help yourself up. And so, yeah. And during my time of medication and continuing to heal from past traumas and hurt, I realized that for a majority of my life, I've always felt that I wasn't properly loved or heard, or I didn't feel like I was enough, and I it was hard for me to trust people and everything. And so one of the things that really changed me was building a relationship with God. And I built my relationship with God by A, going to courses, and B, going to my Sunday sermons. And because by that time there wasn't any small group for high schoolers, so I couldn't go to small group. And so my classmates at the course kind of became like my small group, and that I could talk to them when something happened. And so slowly I started to have a circle that really cared about me and loved me for who I am, and they didn't dislike me because I was broken. And so my mind was slowly renewed by the time I finished my second course, and I was slowly getting off meds because I had a very bad experience with my medication, but also partially was because I didn't know that I had eating problems because of the medication. So I was dropping weight really fast, and it was really hard for me to eat the things from my school because it was too oily and I didn't feel good after. And I also had stomach ulcer. So to this day, I personally prefer things that are made from the kitchen, like my kitchen. And so it really helped me getting the nutrition that I need, and knowing what's inside of the foods, and not having too much sodium or having weird things or too much fried things. Like, the canteens were very unhealthy, even though, like, in health class you would learn that, oh, we need to have a balanced diet, but also the canteens were like filled with fried stuff and like sugary drinks and everything. It was just, I was very disappointed by it, and I still am, to be honest. And so I started to take my health seriously, and I started to get better. And so I slowly stopped my medications and really relied on God. But it was really hard since I couldn't sleep until dawn. Wait, no, not dawn. Wait, dawn? Around like 5 a.m. during that summer. And so it was very hard for me to slowly get back on track. And I was also prepping for my uni exam. So I started prepping for my uni exam that like last year summer. And so right now I'm still learning about how to get better and how to cope when things are stressful and when the burden is a lot, and also learning how to rely on God in this very new season of my life without medication or therapy. I should go to the counselors tomorrow because I really need it. And mm, yeah, I think that's it. Huh, I'm finished? Really? Wait, do I have anything? Okay, I think that was it. So, I hope this version was a lot better. I think it was a lot better, even though I think I wasn't really looking at the camera because I was thinking and recollecting about what happened and how it happened. And so, thank you for watching, and I'll see you next week. Bye.